Thank you, you can hear me. Good evening, everybody. Yay! Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much to Wally for that lovely introduction. So, quite right. Everything he said was right. It's true. And this is me. Let me see. That's it. That's me there. And this is just to prove that it is actually me. Okay? I'm even wearing the hat. Okay? Just evidence. So that's me at Sussex University. This is where I work, at the Innovation Centre there. And I was asked the other day when I was doing a talk, how would you like to be introduced? How would you like people to think about what you do? And I said, I want to be introduced as the bringer of joy. So that's what I've decided is going to be my new introductory line, is I'm the bringer of joy. So I'm hoping that I'm going to see joy filling your hearts this evening. Does that sound good? Excellent. It's always nice to see a bit of agreement on that one. I'm glad to hear that. Okay. So, yes, I am a psychologist and biologist, so I've been interested in the brain for a very, very long time. And I got interested in the brain way back when I discovered that I was feeling stressed, actually. So I did my degree, and I came out and I started working in the world of work, and I realised that I had this thing called stress. And this was back in the 1980s. Now, stress actually was created in the 1980s. Because before the 1980s, it didn't exist. So you couldn't actually go off work with stress in the 1970s. Because it wasn't available to you. Okay? Whatever it was that you went off work with, it wasn't stress. But in the 1980s, we suddenly came up with this new term, stress. And ever since then, it has become a very important part of our lives, don't you think? I don't think there's anyone that I've come across who would say that they don't ever use the words, I'm feeling stressed. And have you ever come across anybody who has been really helpful to you when they have said, well, you just want to relax? I don't know about you, but I've never found that particularly helpful. So anyway, we're going to look at what's actually going on which creates this issue that we have that brings up these little things called vampires. So we're going to look at that in a minute. And just to give you a little bit of additional background on what I've been doing recently. So what I've been looking at is, I've been doing a large piece of research, which is just about to be published, on the state of the nation's brain, particularly in the public sector. So just put your hands up if you work in the public sector, just for a quick show of hands. So there's some people here that might be quite interested in this piece of research. So we've been looking at what is the state of people's brains in the public sector. And what we're aware of is that a lot of people in the public sector are, now this is going to be a really big revelation, feeling, guess what? That's interesting, isn't it? Now, my interest in this, because I've been interested in this for many years, I got involved in the 1990s oddly enough, in developing software. So I've become a software developer as well, actually, which is a bit odd. I didn't know that was going to happen. Who knew? But there we are. I don't think anybody knew they were going to be a software developer in 1990, because there really wasn't anything to develop in 1990. But come 1996, I'm there becoming a software developer, and that's what now is part of what I do. I'm developing software to help people to achieve that inner joy, to find wonderful, stress-free life. Oh, that's what we're looking to do. And what I want to get across really is the importance of well-being and happiness to your health, and you know it's important to your health, and really importantly, performance. Because without well-being and without happiness, you don't have performance. So I say well-being is performance. They are not two separate things. You can't go to work and not have lots of well-being and perform. They just don't happen together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. So it's really important that we discover how to get at our absolute best. And also to find out a little bit about these vampires. So I'm going to take you on a little journey into the world world of the vampires. And we're going to find out a little bit about what's going on in your brains when these little vampires start coming out and rising from the shadows. And are you a bit scared? You feeling scared? Not scared? Not scared? You've all brought your garlic, obviously, so that's great. Okay. And of course you don't need to be scared, because where there are vampires, there are also angels, and that's what we're going to be looking at too. Now, introducing the concept of angels. Angels, my kinds of angels, are a little bit different from the ones that you might be thinking about. So first of all, they're definitely human, and a really important factor about them is they're not perfect. Okay? So any of you out there who have a big, big perfection driver, just listen to that one, let it just sink into it. They're not perfect, but they are top performers when it comes to being open and being vulnerable. It's not something we expect to hear, is it? Being a top performer and being vulnerable, it's really important, because both of those, openness and vulnerability, are angelic qualities. And it's important to remember that these angels are human. And there's a really interesting thing about humanity and being human. So when you think about people and how we respond to things and how we deal with things, and we think about this need for drive for perfection, there's something really important to remember about being a person. And that is that we just can't be perfect, that we are fallible, that we have incompetencies. And there's a name for it, which I don't know if you've heard of this. There's a name for this level of incompetence and fallibility. It's scientific, so be prepared. It's called being human, okay? Being human, that's the whole point of being human. When we talk about human error, we don't talk about it, we don't say angel error or machine error, we say human error, because we know human beings don't get it right all the time. And actually being able to say I don't get it right all the time is a vulnerable process. Because who wants to say, I don't know? Who wants to say, I got it wrong? Okay, it's difficult, isn't it, to do that? So we're going to look at what goes on in our brains and why those things cause us more problems and how we can actually deal with some of these issues. But I'm going to get into the nub of the science as well a bit. Now, I don't know if anybody told you this, but this is an interactive talk. Did they tell you? Probably because you wouldn't have come. But I'm a great believer in interaction. So what I'm going to ask you to do, because I think it's an awful lot easier sometimes to experience things than for me to just talk about them. So I want you to just think about how you're sitting right now. Just sort of check in with yourself. What's going on for you right now? How are you feeling? What's going on? And then what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to stand up, and I know there's enough room because I've checked. Stand up, and then I just want you to turn to as many people as you can and just give them a little angel bump, okay? A little angel bump, little fist bump, okay? So turn to the people, if you're sitting next to people, you know, just a little angel bump, angel bump. If you've got people behind you, make sure you can connect with somebody. And I'm going to explain the science behind this in a minute. But I want to make sure you do this with everyone. But when you do it, whoa, hold on a minute, everyone's going, this is wonderful. When you do it, I want you to say something as well, okay? And I just want you to say, glad to meet you, okay? Glad to meet you, that's all. Glad to meet you. And so it's nice if you can meet some new people too. Hello. body chemistry. And this is what I wanted you to kind of experience it rather than just telling you about it. Because within about 2 minutes, you can change your body chemistry. In fact, you can completely change your body chemistry in 2 minutes. Body chemistry changes are happening all the time. And that little exercise is quite an important exercise in understanding how we actually can change the energy that we feel very quickly. Do you feel slight changing your own energy levels from doing that? Because I tell you what, I noticed that the energy of the room went up. And people go, oh, hello, hi, oh, hi. You know? The energy of the room increased. And that's a thing. That is a thing. Because we often think about, you know, when we go into a room, we can actually think about to ourselves, oh, I don't know what's going on in this room. Do you ever get that? You go into a room, you go, oh, I don't know what's going on here. Don't know what it is, but something's happening. Or you might find, yeah, does anyone get that? Some like big nods of the head are really good. Or hmms. Yeah? You ever walk into a room and you think, oh, what's going on here? This is fun. Not as often, right? Okay, all right. But those things are because we are affected by other people. More on that story later. But the important thing is that what I want you to think about doing is changing your body in order to change your brain, change your body to change your mind. And what you just did is something we call a bend. Okay, it's a bend, which stands for a brief, emotional, non-verbal display. You can change the way your brain is processing things by changing your body. It's kind of reverse engineering. Rather than trying to change my thinking, and you know, this goes back to what I was saying, you know, how often when somebody says to you, calm down, you go, thanks for that, a piece of advice. I'll do that now. I feel better, right? Doesn't happen, does it? It just doesn't happen. Because thinking about something and trying to change our thinking is really, really difficult. And it's difficult because we've got all of these chemicals running around our body telling us to be the thing that we are. Because that's why we are that thing. Have I got complicated? Are you with me? Okay. So what I want you to think about is your own state. And this is the important thing in all of this. It's thinking about my state. Not what I'm thinking, but what's going on in my entire body. And my thinking might be a part of that. And I want to invite you, with that little change in your own state, to reflect on that a little bit as we enter the world of the vampires. Or I should say, as we enter the world of vampires. Is that a bit more dramatic? Yeah, did that work? Right. So what is a vampire? Okay, so I'm now going to remove the hat. It's like I'm getting down to business. Right. So what's a vampire? So anybody got any ideas on what you think of as a vampire? Just give me anything that tells me this is what I think a vampire is. Any? Sorry? A negative thought. Oh, okay, right. A vampire. Actually, there's two types of vampire we've got here. We've got the storybook one, as you can see, and the vampire in reality, which is supposed to look quite cute, apart from the very pointy little teeth. But that's actually a vampire bat. So we've got the two sides, so you're kind of talking about a negative energy. It's like a metaphorical vampire, yeah. What are the factors or what things do you think about vampires? Storybook or otherwise, I don't mind. What do they do?
Suck blood.
Suck blood, thank you, absolutely. The first thing we know about vampires is they suck blood, don't they? And when we think about the vampire in reality, we often think about them sucking up our energy, yeah? Anything else you know about vampires? Oh, they're seductive. So who said that? Who said that very seductively? Yes, the seductive. Yes, they are. They can be very, very charismatic. Both sides of the picture there. Anything else we know about vampires? They come out at night. They absolutely do. They come out at night. What's interesting metaphorically about that is that vampires are working from their unconscious onto your unconscious. So you don't notice it's happening. Now, and have any of you ever had an experience where you wake up in the middle of the night and you think, oh, thing that happened, that person, I was completely taken in. I'm so angry. Why did I agree to do that? You ever had that? Where you just wake up in the night and you think, I was bleeding well vampirised, and at the time you didn't notice. In fact, at the time it was like, it's okay, take more. This is quite enjoyable. It's a very, very weird thing. At the time, you felt like you were doing a great thing, or it felt good, and then you wake up in the night, suddenly, boom, that was wrong. I didn't like that. I was saying it was okay to give me feedback at the time, because I thought that was the thing I should do. But now I think about it, that wasn't good feedback. That was actually quite horrible. Anyone had that sort of experience? Or is it just me? I'm looking around. So another thing, so yeah, they come out at night, absolutely. And another thing which is very relevant about vampires and the stories of vampires, and stories are really important. They're not just stories, they're really important. Is that they cast no shadow. Did you know that about vampires? They cast no shadow because a vampire often looks perfect. Because looking perfect is very important. Not being perfect, because they can't be perfect. What about mirrors? What do we know about vampires and mirrors? Can't see themselves? They have no reflection, they can't see themselves in the mirror. Metaphor. A vampire who is sucking your energy does not see themselves as a vampire who is sucking their energy. They don't see themselves. They don't see themselves in the mirror. Absolutely. And there's another thing which is interesting, and that's the vampires never ever get to the point where they say, do you know what, I'm full. I've never seen Dracula say, oh God, couldn't have another. Don't give me another neck, I just couldn't take it. You know, for goodness sake, I'm going to have to work out now. It never happens, does it? It's insatiable. And it's true for the energy vampire as well. It's insatiable. And there's a reason for it, because it is never satisfactory. It's never satisfactory. So that's a little bit about how the two sides of this work. So let's just have a look at the different types of energy vampire that you may have come across. Let's see. Oh, this is the cheat. Okay. So they're also known as the corruptor vampires. The corruptor vampires, they're the ones that will, well, they'll try and get you involved. Okay, they're the people that will say, if you don't cheat, you're not in our gang. Okay? You don't join in with us, you're not in our gang. They might also say things like, want to draw you into their life of crime, or even their life of fiddling their expenses just a little bit, because we all do it, okay? And if you don't do it, then you're the problem. Right? That's a typical kind of corruptor vampire. You feel like the bad guy when you're watching what they're doing, because you know that you can't do it, and at the same time, you have to get involved, because otherwise, there's all sorts of social isolation and goodness knows what's going on. It's very difficult. These people will tread on anybody's toes to get to the top, and sometimes they're called psychopathic or narcissistic. So that's one type of vampire. Okay, here's another one. Okay, this is different. This is the bully. That's a mongoose. They look like they ought to be cuddling, but they are not. Okay, they're not. They have very sharp teeth. They can kill a cobra. But this is the sort of behaviour that we often see, which is aggressive behaviours. Okay, childish behaviours as well. Like, have you ever heard the expression, "Oh, they're throwing their toys out the pram again"? Have you ever thrown your toys out the pram? Isn't it interesting? So they might make a noise to get what they want, get really loud to get what they want. They might get scary, also call them grouch bears. Grouch bear is another aspect of the bully vampire. I'm just going to be really, really grumpy, and so you have to walk around on eggshells. And it's not my fault, it's you. Right? Anybody Anybody ever experienced that in their lives? There's lots of nodding, this is interesting, good. Okay, here's another one. This is the needy one. Okay. Now, this is an interesting thing I want you to bear in mind. There is never ever a victim of bullying, and there is never ever a victim of vampires. There are only targets. Okay? There is only a target. You are not a victim. I don't like that expression. This particular vampire, the needy one, wants to be a victim. They want to be a victim because they want to be rescued. And you end up having everybody worrying about them. Not because there's any actual special needs that they have, but because they actually have these kind of special case thing, where you've got to be really careful because they might get really careful. Deirdre might get upset. I hope there's no one here called Deirdre. But anyway, and that's not a generic thing about people called Deirdre, by the way. So, you have these people that end up being special cases, and you tiptoe around, are they all right? Quick, make sure they're all right. Have you got your blanket, dear? Are you, it's that sort of thing. These people, they, when they're applying this sort of vampirism, they might burst into tears at the drop of a hat as well. And I'm not talking about people who are unhappy. I'm talking about people who burst into tears at the drop of a hat, right? So I have to be careful with mine. And I think it's also worth bearing in mind that these people, when you're actually looking after them and you're looking out for them, they'll say you're their best friend. But if you ever say, do you know what, I've really helped you with this now, you know what you're doing, I've given you all the support and all the training or all the whatever it is that you need, given you all the resources, I think you can go and do this for yourself now. And they will turn into the Queen of Hearts and go, what? Thought you were a friend of mine, off with your head. And you'll be like, no, he's my really good friend. But you don't, no, I'm not talking to you anymore, come on. Don't know if any of you have ever had that experience. So that's the needy one. Then we've got the attention seeker. This is a very charismatic one. The show-off. Just likes to make a fuss, doesn't want to be forgotten. Not saying there's anyone here like that. Okay. Like overdressing for the occasion, for example. Never mind. I can't be perfect either. Charismatic vampires very often are very good at listening to you, taking your ideas, and then fobbing them off as though they're their own. I don't do that. And then we've got the guilt tripper. The guilt tripper. They like to put on the big act to get their way. Oh, my name. Oh, I've got it. Oh, can't walk very well because I'm back. Can you do that for me, please? Actually, wouldn't it be great if they did say that? Can you do that for me, please? That would be great, but they don't, do they? They just go, oh, I've got to get that book. Don't worry about me. Okay. And if they don't get their way, there tends to be a bit of sulking that goes on as well. And then we have my personal favourite, because I love the slide, the interferer. It's the know-all. The know-all. I know this. Likes to tell you how to do everything. It's very critical, won't be told. Maybe as we're going through these, you're noticing some behaviours in yourself. That's okay. It's okay. Because what we're going to have a look at is, where do these behaviours come from? Right? Would you like to know? Would you like to know? Frantic nodding of heads required. Great. Okay. I told you it's interactive. No, I call my crook would be interactive. Okay. So this is where these behaviours come from. They are developed in childhood. And they are evolutionary behaviours. They are behaviours that have helped us to become the race, the species that we are. And it doesn't matter how ugly they might be, there's a survival reason for them all. So let's have a look at the development of a human being then. Let's start with the little bubba in the womb. There's a baby in the womb there. Isn't that sweet? And of course that baby is dependent upon its mother for sustenance, it's dependent on its mother for survival, right? And what does that baby need? It needs its mother's blood. Okay, hang on a minute. We already are starting with an adorable little vampire. So it's like a little parasite. I know that sounds horrible, but I've got 3 of them. so I can say these things. So when we actually have this little baby in our wombs, those of us who have wombs, the baby is sucking the blood, because the blood has got all the goodness that the child needs to grow and to develop. It's dependent on the mother. And when the baby is born, we then have to find a way of providing that sustenance to the baby, and we do that through a palatable means, not through blood, but actually through something which is very much like blood, which is milk. And the milk that we give to babies is the substitute for blood. And what do the babies do? They suck at the bottle or the breast, because that's where they get their sustenance from. Now there's a really interesting thing about what happens when, if any of you have had children, then you might relate to this. When you first get your child in your arms, some of you might have this, some of you might not, it doesn't matter. You pick your child up for the first time and you look into the eyes of your child, your little baby, and you get this whoosh of love. Have any of you ever had that? Not everybody gets it, so don't feel bad if you don't. But there is a thing that is going on. It's a chemical change in your body that is going on. And that is a big boost of oxytocin. Now, oxytocin actually is stimulated in your body, in your brain, when you make eye contact with your little baby. It's 12 inches is the optimum amount of eye contact space. So 12 inches, because that's how far it is from mother to child's eyeball. And not only that, but the baby can't actually focus on anything which is further than 12 inches away. The baby is primed to be able to focus on the mother's eyes. And when the baby makes contact with the mother, and the mother makes eye contact with the baby, the mother gets a boost of oxytocin. And that oxytocin is very important because it promotes the milk. So it means that the mother can feed. But it does something else as well. It makes you feel love. That's how we describe it. It feels like love. But it's actually oxytocin. I'm sorry to be reductionist on this, and to lose all of the beauty of romance, I'm afraid. But basically, I'm a scientist, so sorry. What can you say? But basically, that's what's happening. That 12 inches is giving you a boost of oxytocin, and that oxytocin feels like love. And it helps the baby to feed. So the baby takes that nourishment. We start off as little vampires. Oh, two in a row. And then the next thing that happens, when the baby is actually born, the baby is actually helpless. We're not born like giraffes. We're not born like calves, right? We can't get up and run, can we? Unless anybody knows something that I don't know. But as far as I know, that can't happen. Babies are born helpless. And the fact that they're helpless is important to our survival and our development, because having unformed brains has enabled us to learn from other people. So that's why we've evolved, to be able to build wonderful buildings like this and to do all the marvellous clever things we do. We don't have to evolve to get to that point. We can learn from other people. Our babies' brains are capable of learning. And there's a marvellous thing about that. Look at how we can evolve. And that's kind of a pro. And the con is that we learn from other people. It's got pros and cons. It's got pros and cons. So after being born, that's when our brains really start to develop. And it means that we're programming in behaviours after we're born. So we're programming behaviours after we're born, rather than having them already there, as we might if we were another beast. So when the child gets to not until they're about 6 or 7, can a little child actually get to a point where they can understand how other people feel. So now, I just want you to get your left hand and get your finger in the air like this. Just put your finger in the air and just point to above your ear. Now that part of your brain, just underneath your skull there, it's got a name. It's called the Temporal Parietal Junction. You don't need to know that. You can call it the TPJ if you like, or you can just call it nothing. It's not important. But what is important is this bit doesn't develop until later, till you're about 6 or 7, and this bit has a very important function. It enables you to imagine what life is like from somebody else's perspective. Until children are 6 or 7, they don't have this ability to understand what the intents and desires of other people are. So we're programming our brains up until 6 or 7 without being able to understand other people's needs. That's interesting, isn't it? And we're programming our brain for something very, very important. We need to survive. It's all about surviving. That is the most important thing. So by the time we get to adulthood, we are capable of being able to know what other people need, and we can make adjustments and support them, because we also know how important it is for us all to connect with each other and to have a social life. It's important because together we're stronger, right? Simple terms, together we're stronger. And for us, for survival, that's the important thing. For survival, together we're stronger. So we have developed, when we're very young, behaviours that will help us to survive. But the problem, and we call them survival codes, bits of coding in our brain. But the problem with them is that they were developed before we had the ability to have rational thinking and to intellectualise, to figure out whether that might be a good idea or not. We've just developed them to survive. That's why. And the reason that we do is because of one key thing. No child will survive if they are left at the side of the road. Okay? And what every child needs to do is to avoid abandonment. It's the most important driver. We must avoid being abandoned. I'm sorry about the teddy bear there, looking extremely sad. I just want to say that no cuddly toys were socially isolated in the making of this slide deck. But yes, so we need to avoid abandonment. That's what it's all about. And you know, when people talk about children being all of those things that we said, cheating and corrupting and bullying and showing off and all of that stuff and sulking and all of that behaviour, what is it? All of that behaviour has got one key driver: connection. Seeking connection. That's what all children need to avoid abandonment. So, why is that so strong? And I'll show you why. Cue a bit of brain science. Okay, so as you can see on this slide, it's a really interesting slide that shows that on this side of the slide, on my left, you can see, it shows where does physical pain manifest in the brain. Now, I just need to explain to you, if you stub your toe, what part of your body is hurting? Well, it's your brain, actually. It's not actually your toe. It's a little message from your toe saying, oh, pain. So it's actually your brain that's hurting, and that's where the pain is in your brain. So, what happens when we feel social pain? So if we're isolated, have you ever had anyone send you to Coventry? God, it's awful. Or have to put up with bullying in the workplace or in the school. It's awful. I'll tell you, it's so bad that the pain from social isolation is in the same place in the brain. It's like being actually physically hurt. It is physical pain, it's in your brain. And actually you can see it's a really interesting thing. When people feel very, very socially isolated and they're feeling the pain of it, you often see them do this. Have you ever seen that? When people put their hand to their head like that and they're feeling like, oh, I feel so isolated. And it's interesting because that's part of the brain that you're actually putting your hand to the part of the brain that's hurting. It actually hurts. In the US, and I'm not advocating this, in the US, this piece of information is so profoundly used that in some places they are prescribing paracetamol to children who are socially isolated at school. They're prescribing paracetamol. Now, I'm not advocating this because I don't think it's a good idea to give painkillers to children that are being bullied. Somehow, that doesn't seem like you're tackling it from the right angle. But it does show how, and it actually does improve how they're feeling, by the way, and it does show how important it is. Social isolation hurts. Full stop, it hurts. So what happens in our brain when the angels are present? So I just want you to have a look at this little slide here, and you can see that there's a part of the brain which is green. It's not normally green, okay, that's just for dramatic effect. But if you put your hand on your forehead here, you put your hand on your forehead, does it feel warm? Does it feel warm? Probably, do you know, that part of your brain is called the Pre-Frontal Cortex, PFC, it's kind of the frontal cortex. So, with the front of the front, that's what it is really. So it's at the very front, that part of the brain. And that lobe there, just that bit, uses 8 times as much energy as any other organ in your body. Just that part of the brain, 8 times as much energy. It's very, very busy. It gets a lot done. And when we're functioning at our best, when the angels are present, this part of the brain is working. And it means that we can do things like we can problem solve, and we can decision make, and we can be creative, and we can cooperate with other people. And nobody ever thinks that they're uncooperative, do they? Have you ever met a really, really uncooperative person, and if you say you're being uncooperative, they absolutely deny it? What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with me. It's because when our brain is closed down, and we're not able to be cooperative, we don't know that we're not being cooperative, because that's the point of oh, never mind, you know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, when that part of the brain is working, we are at our best. The angels are present. We are able to be empathic, like angels can be. We can be compassionate. We have very deep levels of compassion. And importantly, deep levels of compassion for ourselves as well, because that's something which is very much an angelic quality. We can believe that anything is possible. We can change our behaviours, because one of the things that I encourage angels to do is change your body first and not trying to change your thinking. Change your behaviours first, your thinking will follow. And because we accept our imperfection, because we have to accept our imperfection, we're also, when we're angels, able to accept that we all have a little vampire. We all have one. So, how do we deal with this sense of disconnection? How do we use these little vampires? Well, first of all, they are working on. It's closed in there, I don't know if you saw. Closed right in. What happens when we're running from our little vampires is we're working on autopilot. And rather than this lovely part of the brain that can do all these clever things working, that part of the brain physically starts to close down. And I like to say physically a lot, because we tend to think these things are often fluffy and psychological. No, they're not. This is actually a physiological effect in the brain. And there's a part of the brain, as I said, that doesn't actually look like a vampire, or just, for the sake of being technically accurate. But that bit in the middle of the brain, that basal ganglia, this is where our habitual old coding exists. And when we've got to a point where we need to use our little vampire for whatever reason, it's that part of the brain that is stimulated, and this part of the brain that closes down. So our little vampire tends to come up without us actually wanting it to. What can we do about it? Because it's working on autopilot. Well, a couple of things to bear in mind. One, we need it for survival. So the little vampire that we developed actually is really important to our survival, because it enables us to ensure we get connection. So we don't want to say get rid of it, because it's actually important. We need it sometimes. The problem is, sometimes it becomes unhelpful, because these behaviours are coming up at times when maybe we don't want them to. Sometimes we're doing things, and other people are doing things that maybe we don't always want to have in our life. And it's unhelpful because instead of creating the thing that we want, it often creates the thing we don't want. We want connectedness, and we end up creating disconnection. So the thing we want, we don't get. So the vampire is often not doing what we need it to do. But there are times when it does achieve our ends. But this is because of the change of the way that the world is, which I will mention in a minute. But I think one of the things which is important to remember is that if you accept that you have a little vampire, then you also need to remember that when there is somebody pointing a finger at someone saying, you're a vampire, then it's your little vampire pointing the finger at the other little vampire. And I like to call it a little vampire because remember, it is just something that was developed when you were a child. It is still your inner child. So just as a summary, our little vampires are our survival mechanisms. They're our inner child that is looking for connection, seeking connection, and we all have one. So we don't need to get kind of judgmental about other people. That's vampire over there. We need to remember that actually, yeah, they're probably bringing up their little vampire at the moment, and actually I could be doing the same thing myself too. So let's have a look then. Let's have a look at what happens when you activate your angels. Do you fancy doing a bit of angel activation? Shall we do a bit of angel activation? So the most important thing, when you've discovered that actually I'm a vampire too, oh no, was hoping it was everybody else. Oh well, now I've got to deal with that one on top of everything else. So when we're at that point in our lives, it's a very good idea to exercise a bit of compassion, but you know it's really difficult to be compassionate for yourself sometimes, isn't it? It's difficult to be kind to yourself. I mean, it's easy to get really angry about things and feel frustrated and difficult to get out of that, don't you think? So we're going to do a little exercise. Now, do you remember I said bends are brief, emotional, non-verbal displays? Do you remember I said that? And you did one earlier, so this is what we're going to do. I'd like you all to just stand for me for a minute. And you can just stand where you are. It's always good to get an energy change. Okay, take your right hand, put it on your left shoulder, just there. And then just stroke down your arm like that. And do that a few times. It feels nice, doesn't it? You know, it feels nice because this is actually reawakening a part of your brain that says, oh, I'm being looked after right now. And it's important it's right hand and left. Okay, so just stroke it. You know, sometimes when I'm talking to people who are really having a really difficult time and they're very angry or very upset about something, and I say, look, to get out of that, just you know, use this little bend. And then we go on talking and they just keep doing it. This is nice. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling nice. So it changes your body chemistry there, a little gentle. That's nice, isn't it? So you can sit down now, feeling, and I think that you're going to sit down feeling a little bit like, isn't that interesting? And no other human being was involved in that as well. So that's how you can bring a bit of compassion into your life. Oh, let's get the slides ticking. Oh, that's it. Right, okay. So the important thing, you know, I was talking about when you go into a room sometimes and you kind of feel as though there's something going on in that room and it affects you. And some people can walk into a room and they can make you really feel drained. You know, somebody can come and find you and you think, oh, that person's draining me. And other people can walk in and you think it's like a breath of fresh air. Yeah? You ever had that? They're like a breath of fresh air. I love it when they come to work. Uh-oh, here comes the vampire. Right? We all have that experience, don't we? From time to time. What's going on? Well, there is a science behind this. It's called co-regulation. So co-regulation is the way that my body reacts to your body reacts to mine. It's not magic. I'm sorry, it's not magic. I'd really like it to be, but, you know, I'm a scientist, so I'm boring like that. And it actually turns out that it's a scientific thing that goes on. So what's actually happening is, reacting, it's picking up cues from other people's bodies, and it happens really quickly. It's how we all regulate each other. We make this kind of hive mind very, very quickly. We are a hive mind. We're not made to be on our own. We're made to connect to other people. That's what it's all about. And co-regulation is the way that we do it. So my body chemistry is going to be affected by you, and your body chemistry is going to be affected by me. It's real. It's science. Tell people. Don't come in looking miserable. You're affecting everybody. Yes, you are. It's science. Scientifically flipping proven. Let me tell you, boss. Don't say I said it. So what can we do to change? Well, okay, we can't really change other people. We know that, don't we? I mean, do we know that? Do we? Is there anyone here that doesn't know that? Is there anyone here who can? You know, because if you've got that skill, tell me, I'd like to know. But we actually can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. But we can influence other people because we can co-regulate too. So do we choose to allow our bodies to be co-regulated into feeling like this? Or do we say, no, I'm going to change my brain state and I'm going to get in control of my brain state? And I think the second one is a good one, don't you? So I think what we should do is find a way of activating a little bit of joy. I said I was the bringer of joy. I'm going to make it happen whether you like it or not. So, okay, so everybody get on your feet and we'll do a brief emotional non-verbal display. Everybody, please, I ask you kindly and with my heart. Okay. So what we're going to do, this little bend is actually not difficult to do, and you know you're going to. The idea is that they are easy, and you can do them in your own way, in your own way, in your own time, your own space. You know, some people slide off to the loo, go in the cubicle to do their little bends, but I don't know what goes on there, so I'm not going to go any further. Could get dangerous. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bend to bring a little bit of joy. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to just lean back and take a nice big deep breath in. And then I want you to go forward. And as you go forward into a little bit of a fold, I want you to do a really, really silly laugh. Like that, completely fake. Off you go. Right. And then breathe in and stand up. And now do another really silly one. And one more. It's really funny, isn't it? Because even if it's very, very fake, it does affect you. It changes your body chemistry. So that is something you can do when your boss comes in and says, "Where's my report?" And you're feeling kind of undiscouraged. You go, "Hold on a minute." Might give you the sack. Don't blame me. But anyway, that actually makes a difference to you. You can sit down. It changes you. Now, why does it make a difference? I'll tell you for why. Because when you laugh, it releases the jaw. And it also relaxes the muscles around the eye. This is important. This is important. Because when you feel stressed or angry, it's here that your brain connects with the jaw. How many people get tight jaw? Yeah. So tight jaw, you can laugh and get rid of that tight jaw. A tight jaw means your brain is probably feeling stressed. Okay. So a good way to reduce that level of stress is to do a fake laugh, because it releases the jaw. It also creates a relaxation around the orbital muscles of the eye. When people are smiling, they have nice lines around their eyes, right? They look fantastic, those lines around your eyes. And also it means that the muscles are relaxed. If you ever see anybody like this, hello, how are you? They're a psychopath, all right? You want your eyes to be all liney because it means relaxation, and when you're relaxed here, you're relaxed here. So we can reverse engineer it. Trying to relax up here, difficult, relaxing the jaw, releasing it, getting into nice relaxed eyes, easier, okay? So, what pushes you over the edge into your little vampire? Let's see, what happens? What pushes you into it? This is the key to the environment that we're in. If you think about it like traffic lights, green, amber and red, when we are in a safe and certain environment, don't you love that picture of the husky and the polar bear? There's some really what's lovely about that is if you look, the jaws are relaxed and the eyes are relaxed. That's true social engagement. Huskies and polar bears do play with each other. Huskies are cuddled by polar bears before they eat them. But let's not worry about that right now. So the safe and certain area, that when we're feeling safe and we're feeling certain, it's great. We can rest, we can relax, we can digest our food, we can restore ourselves, and we can go to sleep because we feel safe and we know everything's okay around us. Makes sense, doesn't it? When we move up a level into safe and uncertain, now at the lower level of that's what work can be often like. And it can be great. In fact, you know when you see two dogs playing like this and you see them, they go, and then and it sounds like they're ripping their throats out, but they're actually not hurting each other at all. Do you know what I mean? It's because they have this kind of contract that they're going to be safe, but I'm not going to know what's going to happen next. And that's what play is. Play is safe but uncertain. There's an element of fun to uncertainty when it's safe. And that little wiggly line is how we spend most of our life if it's going well. So we're going up and down between safe and certain, and then maybe a little bit of safe but uncertain, a bit of play, a bit of work, a bit of fun, and it goes up and down and goes up and down. But if it goes too far and we get into unsafe and uncertain, that's the bunny in the headlights. Okay? And our brains actually do freeze. They shut right down. So it's all about how we perceive the environment. It's our perception of the environment that is important. Now this is a theory. I thought I'd get, nice and academic on you for a bit, just to look like I know what I'm talking about, just in case there's any doubt. There's a theory called polyvagal theory. Now the vagus nerve runs from the head to all the rest of the body. Vagal means wandering. It wanders around the whole body. You don't need to know much more than that. But that's the name of the theory because it's about how our brains are connected. This is an important bit of science. Your brain is connected to the rest of your body. Okay? If you take nothing else away from this lecture, take that away. But anyway, when we're in that zone, that green zone, and we're moving up into the yellow zone, I actually don't think that's a bad thing. I call it positively energized when we're in that yellow amber zone. So we can be in a safe zone and we can be activating our angels and joyful and wonderful. But there are times when we have to be positively energized. Hey, come on guys, we've got to get on with it, right? We can't go all our life in zenitude. As a friend of mine calls it, zenitude. She's French. But we can't be like that all the time. And it's not good for us to be like that all the time. What we need to be is we need to be in a state sometimes where we're relaxed and sometimes where we can jolly well get on with things and have fun, for goodness sake. Some fun can be had like this, but a lot of fun can be had like this. Okay, and that's just my life. So when we get to the point where we're being pushed a little bit too far into unsafe, so we're going towards, there's too much uncertainty and we're moving towards unsafe. This is where the little vampires start coming out because our brain is starting to close down and we're starting to rely on old programming. So if you've ever had that experience or you've heard people say, oh, they reverted to type. They were great for ages and then all of a sudden something happened and back to that old thing again. Yeah, well, it's because that's what we do. And again, remember, it's all about your perception of the environment. And for most people at the moment, from my research, people perceiving the work environment as dangerous. And even though we know that we're not a life threat, if we perceive the working environment as dangerous, it affects our body chemistry. And it reduces our performance and it increases the use of our little vampires. So being positively activated is great. Your eyes work better, your ears work better, everything is kind of like rocking and rolling. But when it goes too far, then other things start to happen. Then you start moving into other behaviours like either fight or flight. And you've probably heard of fight or flight. Have you all heard of fight or flight? You start moving into those sorts of behaviours. You start moving, if you're going into flight, you might be worried and anxious and fearful and then eventually panicking, okay? If you're going into fight, you might be frustrated, irritated, angry, raging. So that's what happens when you're going up that curve there. And if it pushes over the line into we're no longer safe, we were safe and uncertain for a while, we're no longer safe. Now we are unsafe, we're in the red zone. Our bodies say that's life threat. And when we're in life threat, our bodies decide to conserve energy and to shut down. And there's a good reason for this. Because if anyone here has ever had a cat bring a mouse in, any of you ever had that? And the cat brings a mouse in and you drops it on the floor and you think, oh no, another dead mouse. I'll pick that up in a minute. And 2 seconds later the mouse jumps up and runs away. Have you ever seen that? Mice have got the same, we are like mice is what I'm saying. We're like mice. Mice have the same mechanism. They can immobilise their bodies when they're in life threat. It's a good idea because one, the cat might lose interest and you get away. So that's a plan, right? And two, if it doesn't, well at least I'm not going to be here when the worst happens and I die. I don't have a painful death. So it makes sense. We have the same sort of programming, the same sort of thing. But losing your job isn't actually life threat, but our perception is that dangerous. Because if you lose your job, how are you going to put food on the table? How are you going to pay a mortgage? It's dangerous to us. So this is when we can start getting into a state where we could go into shutdown. So when we get right up into that state, we go beyond the little vampire. Now we're getting to the point where we want to freeze. There's an interesting thing that happens when you start freezing, and you might have noticed this, when you get under a huge amount of pressure. Has anybody been under so much pressure that they found that they can't talk? Right? Yeah? You ever had that? Or you might have had the experience where some people pass out, don't they? You might have had the experience where what you can hear isn't right, it's kind of like underwater. Some people have that, where it's like, can't hear what people are saying. They are actual phenomena. Those things actually happen. They're physiological phenomena. The brain connected to the larynx stops. So you literally can't speak. And also the idea of freezing. You literally often freeze, where you just can't move. And don't ever let anybody tell you that somebody who was a victim of any kind of violence or abuse of any kind, doesn't have to be violent, if they didn't fight back, because often there's this, why didn't you fight back? Well, because their brain said, don't fight back, freeze, because we're going to keep you alive. Okay, so it works. So it's worth remembering that, and it's worth remembering that it is our perception of the environment that makes a difference. And we can change the way we perceive it if we reverse engineer the way our brains are perceiving the environment. So we can actually see when something looks dangerous, we can have a word with ourselves and say, okay, I'm overreacting to this. What am I going to do about it? And this is what we're going to do about it. We're going to do a bend. Are you ready? Everybody, please rise to your feet. Let us find a way of changing your brain quickly so that you can get to a point where you can get into the sort of chemistry, the sort of brain chemistry and body chemistry that will allow you to be able to cope with the things in the moment. Would that be useful? So if you've ever had those experiences when you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, or I can't think, or anything like that, this is the answer. Feet, just a bit more than the hips with the palm. Hands, delicately hips and chin lifted. Because, you know, if there's a saber-toothed tiger in the room, my predator of choice, by the way, if there is a saber-toothed tiger in the room, you're not going to stand like this, are you? You'd be under the desk, or, you know, something like that. So what this says is, to my body, to my brain, my chin's lifted, there is no, look, here's my jugular, there is no threat. And by standing in this open posture, you actually change your brain chemistry. It's so simple. 2 minutes. And I like to do this in a particular way. I like to go, 2 minutes. I don't know why, it just gives me fun. Do I have to have a reason? Some of you will say yes, but do you know, I don't care. So 2 minutes like this changes your brain chemistry. Something really important happens as well. You become really good at focus, because it increases testosterone in your brain, actually. And when you've got more testosterone in your brain, you become really good at focus. So if you've got to do a task that involves focus, 2 minutes like this, you'll be more focused. Reversing the engineering. It's a life habit. And if you're under stress and you're feeling like the stress is coming up, this reduces the cortisol in your body, so you don't feel as stressed. So you're going into an interview, 2 minutes in the loo. You don't need to sit. Or any posture that keeps you open. If you're sitting at an interview, you know, or going to work on the bus and you see people, I'm being really naughty sitting in here, okay? Like this, on their mobile phones. Look at the body posture. Big or small? Small. Small means I'm going to start going into a sense of feeling under threat. So if I sit like this, take my space, man spread, okay, or maybe not that far, but even if you just let your arms be a little bit more open, you will change your processing. You stop feeling the stress. So what this is about is, don't try to change your brain. Change your body. Change your body to change the way your brain processes by altering your body chemistry. It's cool, isn't it? Right, I've got another thing for you. While you're standing like this, we're going to do something else. Now, I said to you, your larynx sometimes doesn't work. So if you're feeling like, I want to activate my angel of integrity, and I need to say to my boss, look, you're a miserable old goat when you come in on Monday morning, okay? I don't know your boss. I'm only guessing. Right, what you can do, get into this posture, hand on throat. Now, this is an important reason, this. Hand on throat. And you can say, I speak my truth. I speak my truth. You can say that to yourself. But it's better if you say it out loud. I speak my truth. I speak my truth. Right. Why? Why is that important? Because you're stimulating your larynx and you're reminding your brain that it can work. Okay? So you're literally stimulating your larynx, getting the brain to say, right, we've got to open up that voice box because we need to use it. Do it in combination is very useful because you reduce your stress, you get focus, and you get your voice box working at the same time. What could be better than that? Amazing. So there we are. You can sit down now if you like, but only for a short moment while I finish off. So these are our angels. These are our angels that we've been looking at. We've been looking at getting empowered. We've been looking at feeling compassion for ourselves, most importantly. We've been laughing our way to joy. And importantly, we've been getting a bit of integrity because we're going to tell people the truth in the kindest possible way. And the final angel there is the angel of courage. And the angel of courage is really important because it's a courageous thing to be vulnerable. It's a courageous thing to say, I don't know. It's a courageous thing to say, I'm frightened. It's a courageous thing to say, I think my little vampire just bit you then. Okay? All of those things are very courageous. And to create a safe culture, we have to sometimes speak out. And that is a courageous and vulnerable thing to do. And angels are happy with being vulnerable. Vulnerability is a fantastic demonstration of courage. Because nobody is courageous who doesn't actually feel vulnerable. Nobody is courageous who doesn't feel scared. You know, if you jump out of an aeroplane and it doesn't frighten you, that's not courage. If it scares the living daylights out of you and you do it anyway, that's courage, right? So, my sister, who is the biggest scaredy pants of all people, scaredy pants? Is that a word? Scaredy cat. I said, what scaredy pants are? What that? She's the biggest scaredy cat in the world, and yet I think she's the most courageous person I've ever met, because she has done everything that frightens her. She's frightened of heights, so she abseils down the, telecom tower or whatever it was. She's scared of water, so she goes diving. Whatever she's scared of, which is everything, she does. That, I think, is incredible courage. So courage is not about looking brave and bravery. It's about saying, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be vulnerable when I do it. And actually being able to say to people, I feel vulnerable. And creating a society and a community where we can say, can we connect with each other, please? Actually, that's a vulnerable thing to do, to say, I want to connect with you. It was a vulnerable thing for you all to turn around and fist bump somebody. It was a vulnerable thing if you don't know that person, right? And you did it. So that's courage. And that's the sort of courage I think we should be really celebrating, because it's helping us to connect. So let's finally, almost finally, yes, let's make it final. Let's finally end up with a little opportunity to activate our courage and our acceptance. So if you'd all like to stand again, and bear with me in changing your brain and body chemistry. Are you up for this? Okay, this is great. This is wonderful that you're all getting involved. So we're going to do a little, we call this Maria of the Mountain. Now my name is Maria, but this is not named after me. It's named after Maria von Trapp. You know her from The Sound of Music? Reminds me where this is going. Okay, so what we do is called Maria of the Mountain. What we want to do is bend your knees and get your hands as though you're pulling something up like that, and then open up like that. So pull up your energy and open up your arms. And when you do that, if you feel inclined to go, then go for it, is what I said. It's not necessary, it's not mandatory, but if you want to, you can. And what I want you to do now is just to do this again, and this time, what we're going to do is we're going to get a little bit of dopamine going, okay? We're going to get a little bit of dopamine. Dopamine, actually, people don't like the way I say this. I'm going to say it anyway. What happens in your brain when you feel pleasure is you get a squirt of dopamine into your pleasure centre. When I say that, people say to me, too much, Maria. So I'm sorry, but it's true. You get a squirt of dopamine into your pleasure centre. What can I say? It's the truth. But anyway, I think we could all do with a squirt of dopamine into our pleasure centres, don't you? Do you fancy a little squirt? I know I do. So one wonderful way of doing this is to skip. Actually, did you know that? Skipping creates dopamine. I skip up and down corridors all the time. I skip up and down railway platforms as well, I've got a reputation. But anyway, but another thing you can do is this. Reach, stretch. Don't stick your fingers in anyone's eyes. Stretch. So have a little jump, stretch. You just do jump. It gets the dopamine going. And another way we can do it is like this. Is to go, way to go, Willie. So turn to somebody and give them a little high five. Do you know, I never used to be a fan of the high five. Never used to be a fan of it until I discovered that it made my pleasure centre happen. So to finish off, it's been so lovely being here with you all today. I've really enjoyed being here. I hope you have enjoyed my weirdness, which I'm completely unashamed about. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed a bit of brain science. And I think we should finish with one really important bit of brain change. So, everybody get your arms up in the air like this. Now, this posture is called fiero. It means pride. It's an innate posture. We do this posture when we achieve something, right? It's natural. Even congenitally blind people do this. But when you do this, you get a little bit of dopamine. So, yes. Now, if you want to keep doing something, you want to change your habits, how do you change your habits? You program your brain. And you program your brain with a little bit of dopamine. So when I do something good, I go, yes, right? And two things happen. One, the mandatory squirt. Okay. But two, our brain is told, do that again.